Today, we're joined by two very accomplished leadership coaches, and our discussion is going to be around leadership and coaching. Terry is a talent acquisition leader and coach, having served 7 years as a talent leader at Google. And she also spent time at Databricks and Samsung. And most recently, she founded her own company called The Brass. I love that name. And Amy is joining us she runs her own business, coaching founders and their teams, and has had a strong impact helping folks build emotionally intelligent and high-performing teams and cultures. She was at Google for 6 years previously in sales and business development, and maybe she'll even share with us how she made the transition into coaching. So with that, I will turn it over to Terry. Maybe you can start by introducing yourself and telling us about your career.
Sure, great. And so good to see everyone. And Catherine, thanks for leading these discussions. And Amy, really great to see you and everyone here. Again, just a really plug for the career series as well. It's just been such a nurturing environment, I think, for me and for many. And I just feel like every time I come to this meeting, we learn from each other, and we're reminded of all the great things that are happening, and our ability to kind of be resilient. And the Xoogler community really fosters that real sense of community. So thanks to everybody. So as Catherine said, I've really spent most of my career, really the past almost 20 years, in talent acquisition in multiple roles, but mostly recruiting and advising hiring managers on hiring strategies and talent operations, hiring plans, not to get into the details. At Google, I supported YouTube, Google TV, which is now Chromecast, and I think Chromecast is still around, Helpouts, which went into the sunset, and then YouTube and Google Fiber. I think I said that. And then I also was recently, last year, I was at Databricks, which is a startup, hyper-growth. Many of you may have heard of them. And I led the global tech recruiting team there, and also started the go-to-market sales executive recruiting team. So that was super fun. And really, I've spent, like I said, most of my last part of my career in talent acquisition, and really also coaching people, industry professionals in the candidate experience, and as a player coach in many of my roles, and so was working with candidates a lot, and currently I'm doing that, managing teams. And I think one of the themes that I would mention that's really followed me throughout my career, and just thinking about it, was really caring deeply about supporting women and underrepresented groups in how to advance in the workplace and in society in general. And that kind of brings me to where I am now in starting this company called The Brass. I think I was unknowingly working on it for many years, or kind of was being born conceptually, even unconsciously. But basically, I feel really strongly about supporting women, underrepresented groups, and helping women to thrive in their mid to late careers, and building a community around that. So that's why I created The Brass. I mean, it may expand into other things, but that's kind of a mission-driven vision I have, and right now it's a professional services company. So that gives you a little bit of a recent, just 2 snippets on what happened before talent acquisition. I had a career in Wall Street, made a transition to real estate, and then into Silicon Valley talent acquisition. So I've had some career transitions, which also kind of inform some of really why The Brass and how I'm hoping to help people. So that's a wrap there.
Awesome. Thank you, Terry. And Amy, your turn.
Terry, it's so nice to meet you. This is what I love about this community. It's just each other. I remember my first Xoogler event after I left, and the feeling of nostalgia and connection and relief in being amongst each other. So I hope we can have some of that today. Maybe even in the chat, we can all put in, how long it's been since we left Google, and maybe what we did there, so we can see who each other is. You can do that while I'm giving my intro. I started at Google in 2011. I was on Google Offers, which is a product that also got sunset because it wasn't a $1 billion business, right? So I was the first sales hire in the New York City office, and it was run by Layla Sturdy at the time. I don't know if anybody's since interacted with her. Amazing, amazing woman leader at Google. Then I went into business development and partnerships. I moved to the Mountain View office, worked under Claire Hughes Johnson. I don't know if anyone remembers her as well. She's, I think, went to Stripe, right? Amazing leader, right? And then I got my dream Google job, which is I went to London and started internationalizing Android Pay, which is now known as Google Pay. And it was brilliant. I would fly to Spain and grab some jamon and do some partner meetings. And then I also burnt out. So that's very part and parcel of my Google story. I don't know if anyone else here also has been through something similar. Mine was both physically. I went to the ER 3 times in 1 year, and I ended up with a deep vein thrombosis situation where, goodness, do I have a blood clot that could go to my lung and cause really something fatal? It had this headline flash over my head when I was in this Uber on the way to the ER, and it was like, Google employee dies alone in Poland, because that's where I was on a partner meeting. But that woke me up. It really woke me up, and it forced me to ask, what the heck am I doing with my life? Because I love working, I love people, but is this my purpose? That's how I got into coaching. That's kind of the path that I took. So now I have built a little practice where I coach founders. I love people who build things. I think that's really exciting. I consider myself a little bit of a rebel because I was born in China. I'm a first generation immigrant. My parents both are rebels from escaping that government. And now I get to do the thing that always gave me energy, right, when I was at Google, which was listening to others, helping solve problems, bringing new perspective to things. And especially for a group of people, I work with a lot of female founders, Terry, to echo your sort of mission, right? And also underrepresented founders, because I like giving people power where they weren't necessarily granted it themselves. So that's a little about me.
That's it. Awesome, Amy. Thank you. That's a super inspirational story. I was going to ask you what inspired you to become a coach. A question for both of you. You've started to answer it, Amy. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how coaching works, if folks are not familiar with it.
Yeah, what the heck is coaching? I get that question a lot. And also, why is it so expensive? And how could you, all these questions. I think the easiest way to understand it, especially for this audience, is thinking about it this way. We all walk around with a program of how we operate. Like we have our own OS, and that program is written by code. And that code was written from experiences in our life, whether that was an intentional thing that we wrote or something we picked up along the way from someone else. And then we meet our lives and we are met with challenges, whether that's a promotion that we want or a layoff or something in our personal lives. And we're still running that same program. It hasn't been upgraded. It hasn't been examined. And although it got us to where we are, it oftentimes can't get us to where we want to go. So for me, that's what coaching does, is we look at the lines of code that have been written, we can rewrite them, we can upgrade your software and give you access to hardware that you already have. So I hope that's a good explanation.
I love it. I need an upgrade. I need my over-the-air update. Terry, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I love that, Amy. And I need an upgrade too. I love this, sort of talking about like what inspires us to do anything and what inspires someone to be in coaching. And I want to say we're all coaching in some ways. I mean, we're all giving advice to people that we care about, to our colleagues. And I think coaching, to Amy's point, it almost puts a framework around, in mapping out, where are you, where are you now and where do you want to go, and connecting those dots. And, I think what inspired me to look at and really kind of develop a coaching program within the brass was I had a bigger vision, and something I really care about is ageism, and the whole general idea that are we less valuable as we age? And I thought, well, how do I help solve that? And by the way, there are a lot of people helping to solve that. I learned that in research over the last 5 years that I've been doing on the longevity economy. But the coaching piece is something I thought, well, I kind of know how to do that. So how do I, help with the bigger problem? And the delivery system is coaching, and really, I think Amy said it beautifully of what it actually is. So I kind of gave you what inspired me to use coaching as a delivery system, but it helped to really help us thrive and grow in our mid to late careers, and that we have wisdom to share no matter where we are in our careers, basically. But I think coaching helps to evaluate and do self-exploration, and then connect the dots to something in the world that we want to do, basically.
Awesome. I feel like we could do a whole nother session on ageism, especially in Silicon Valley, where it's, the expectation is that founders are 25, and that they bring, that experience to take a company to the next level. So I'd like to kind of put a pin in that one, and also like turn our attention to the broader topic of leadership and how you think about leadership and what makes a successful leader. And I'd like to preface it by saying that I've often heard people confuse the concept of leadership with being a people manager. And I'd like to debunk that myth, because in my opinion, leading is not dependent at all on your title or your reporting structure, or any of those things, but rather it's how you behave and how you show up and how you interact with those around you. But so I'll put that out there as a straw person thought, and get your feedback.
I'd love to jump in there, Catherine, on that. I absolutely agree. Leadership does not equal title at all, right? And actually, if we look at our chat, like the first person to say hi was Lucy. I think that's an act of leadership. And Anna, you were the first person to say hi when we jumped on, you have your camera on. That's absolutely an act of leadership, right? Because it creates an event for others to follow. You've changed our space by doing that. So first, I want to acknowledge that. Second, I like defining things in like first principles. I think the most basic sort of way to understand what a leader is simply someone others follow. That's it. Someone others follow. And there's a lot to that. Like, why do we follow someone, right? And it's also necessarily interrelational. You can't be a leader of no one. That's not a leader. You're I don't know what you are, right? You're castaway. But then we're really talking about what makes people connect with one another. I also like to give, because if you Google like what makes a leader, what are the qualities, you'll find so much just all over the place. I have found one set of qualities of leadership that I really, really like. It actually comes from a field of study called internal family systems. I like to share that because it's easy to remember. There are 8 C's. The words are 8 C's for qualities of leaders. So they are compassionate, connected, confident, calm, creative, courageous. I think curious is my last one. I'll put it in the chat. It's like naming the 7 dwarves. So it's super clear.
I want to add comical, because I just
that's a brilliant one.
Yeah, that's really great. I love that concept of it. You bring leadership to everyday things you do, and people choose to follow you based on how you show up. So I love that. Terry?
Yeah. I mean, again, Amy, that I love the themes and the C's, and I love, Catherine, comical. We were kind of talking about this, how important it is to kind of infuse humor in our day, maybe not take ourselves so seriously. I think that's actually a good leader too, good quality. The thing that I thought about, Amy, as you're sharing as well, is just to add is we are all leaders, and I think part of leadership is really kind of doing this inner work, so inner work, working on our own development, that's taking leadership, and then the outer work of supporting other people's development. And I think about that a lot, and how I do it. I mean, I think we all have different ways that we kind of reflect on the day, but it's really thinking, meditating and writing and evaluating the day, but looking at where I need to grow, and then how that might help other people. But this sort of inner work and outer work, as far as really, for me, and what I've seen with other people, translates into good leaders. And I think the word we use a lot is that emotional intelligence, and it's being able to manage your emotions in a really positive way, to inspire people, but also to take feedback, which I know we're going to be talking about at some point as well.
Right. And then leading up to that, the flip side is what leadership mistakes, and obviously without naming any names, but what mistakes do you see leaders making that are holding them back? And talk to us about how you've worked through those with some of your coaching folks.
I can share one, or Terry, would you like to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think a lot about coaching women leaders, and there's an article out there. Please Google it. If I can get my stuff together, I'll put the link in the chat. It's called "Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome." I'd love to see.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's a topic in itself. I so agree with you there.
Yeah, I think that is to call it a mistake we make is actually not giving ourselves enough credit, and actually not addressing where the system that we operate in can take some contribution and blame for how it is that we often feel like we don't belong in certain rooms or situations. But that is something that I feel like is very powerful to coach on. Let's do a real example, right? How often have we been in a meeting and not spoken up, or feel like we're shrinking, or feel unsure? Is our question, or is how we're thinking about something, is that aligned? And then the meeting goes by so fast, and all of a sudden we get to the end and maybe we haven't said anything. We haven't added our voice. And there's a lot going on behind that, a lot of software, a lot of code, but also a lot in the environment that influences that behavior. And I find that with coaching, what we can do is we can look at, well, what is the power dynamic there? What is the assumed role that you're taking? What is the belief that you might have? Like, oh, maybe I should only speak up if I have all the answers, or I'm supposed to have all the answers as a leader. That's one I hear a lot. So when I don't have the answers, what I go to is then, okay, well, I might not say anything, instead of, well, let me ask so I can get the answers. Let me go ask these questions and possibly take up space and make other people uncomfortable, or slow down the meeting, God forbid, right? So that I can get the information I need to add my perspective, my logic, my insight, my vision to this conversation. So there's absolutely a kind of reframing of what is actually happening in that meeting in your role. And then in coaching, what we also do is we look at, though, tactically, how does that sound coming out of your mouth? What do the words actually feel like? Because it's going to be hard to just jump in and change like that. But if you can practice, right? Hey, wait a moment, right? Whatever it might sound like, and get a chance to almost rehearse that with a coach, then in the moment you feel much more prepared, and now you're making real changes. So I hope that answers the question. Super helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, Amy, I like the idea too of rehearsing and really kind of going through, that process and thinking it through. And you made me think about, and I've had this happen a few times with clients that I've worked with in the past, and it goes back to, having that credibility. Do we have confidence to speak up in a room? And where I had someone end up, and again, it's asking the right questions to this client is, I think sometimes it's when we go to the solution of, I need to make myself better in some way. Oh, I need to go back to school, or I need some kind of advanced degree. That's why, I'm missing something. There is a true skills gap, when it's really, Amy, kind of what you're talking about is, wait a second, let's look at the situation. Let's look at what are the relationships in the room, in the company, and realizing that we're really influencing, but maybe our voice isn't being heard, or maybe we need to kind of think through more strategically, what are those relationships we need to build, instead of going and saying, oh my gosh, I actually need this other really big thing, and I need to go to get another degree. And, especially like when we're in mid to late stage, it's weighing the trade-offs, because that's then thinking through it, the cost, the time, and not that it's not a solution, you know, not to say that that could be helpful, but what I end up doing is asking the question, like, what is the real problem? If are you feeling not heard? Do you feel like you know, you need to build more relationships, and it's an influence issue rather than a degree issue. So I just find that I've heard it enough that we come up with a solution that's actually like a really hard one. Like, we can pick the easier one. Like, maybe it's just a matter of what you're saying is analyzing the situation and just building those relationships in a different way.
Terry, I want to add on. I think you said something so important that I think I am totally guilty of this. I've done this my whole life. And so include me in this, right? And I think a lot of this is the stop telling women they have imposter syndrome thing, which is, I think a lot of us make this foundational attribution error, which is we see something in our environment, it challenges us. And then instead of thinking, wait, that environment was not built for me, or that environment doesn't actually work for the men either, right? Instead of thinking that, we think, oh, maybe it's me. Maybe I need to go get that degree, or maybe I need to learn how to do this or that, or maybe I'm not fast enough. And that is a foundational attribution error. Yes, it's always good to look inside because we have control over how we grow ourselves. And in fact, I think for high achieving women, that's what's got us where we are. But at some point, we have to stop putting it all on us. And that's where I think our power and perspective can come from. And then we can lead and make the situation better for everyone.
So I'm so glad you picked up on that, because that's exactly the point I wanted to hammer, that we always take ownership of what's going on and blame ourselves for it. And but question back to you both then. Okay, knowing that that's the dynamic, knowing that if you feel not empowered to speak up in a meeting, not empowered to lead or influence or get decisions made, how do you change that dynamic? So you're in a big room with a big meeting with a lot of big egos and big voices dominating. How do you, my own gut is that you don't insert yourself there, that you insert yourself individually with those folks and try to create space for yourself. But how do you coach people to achieve that?
Yeah, I mean, Catherine, I think I would agree with, you don't do it like kind of in the moment, in the big room, in this example. You start building relationships outside of that room. But I also think it's very, very hard to do, and also being aware of it. And for me, in my own personal experience, what I have had happen, and it was this whole idea of, you know, that we are touching on is getting feedback. I actually had somebody who was my manager or boss, who was a leader, because he took the time to give me feedback, because I was that person in the room that was, the feedback was scattered, unprepared, needed to be more succinct and crisp, and I'm always working on that, by the way. But anyway, you know, in the meeting stakes were high, because it's reporting on, you know, how we move the company forward on hiring. Well, luckily my manager was in the room, and could give me the feedback on, okay, in order to influence this group, in order to move ahead, in order to be perceived differently, here's some very simple things that you can do. And even suggested and gave me some resources, as, you know, listening to Chris Voss. I don't know if you all know Chris Voss. He's very, very good. Yeah, Chris Voss. And then Crucial Conversations When the Stakes Are High is also a really good book. But, you know, and I did that because I really wanted to succeed, and things improved. But I needed somebody to tell me. So sometimes that's the case, but it's, you know, and then we have to decide, well, is that person, is it someone that we trust? But I think it's hard to be in the room and not notice and then figure out how to improve. It helps to get some kind of constructive feedback.
I love that. I want to +1 both of that. Especially what you both started talking about, which is how do you create the relationships and the trust that's going to help you influence. And I actually think as women, we're very good at that. Oftentimes we're very good at that. And it is in terms of like how we're perceived, it is something that it goes along with how women are perceived, that we're good at relational stuff. So that may work for us. So I say definitely do that. And I do want to give two examples of when you are in the meeting, things you can do. One is, I'll give you an example. Stories are always helpful, right? So I was working on a product called Hands-Free at Google, and I was in business development and in meetings with VP of engineering and product. And if you remember Google, there's a power dynamic there between sales and business development and engineering and product. So, and I was also younger and, all these things. So I was silent in a lot of those meetings, even though I was the only person in that room representing the perspective of, guess who? The user. Because I was the one having conversations with the user every day. And at that time, it was merchants in Palo Alto, little bakeries. We were testing this payment product on. And one day I realized that. I thought, wait a minute, if I don't speak up and challenge what's being said here, interrupt this VP of engineering, right? Then who's going to lose? It's going to be the user. And that gave me the courage to actually start speaking. It gave me a different role to play. And I find that really helps when I coach women, because there's been a study, right? Women perform worse than men at the negotiating table, except when they're negotiating on behalf of others. So there's something here. There's like a mama bear energy. There is a advocate energy that we can all tap into that I think can help us speak up in meetings and give us the courage to do so. And the other quick tip I have for anyone who's trying to do that is, if it feels difficult to really get your voice in, one thing that can be very helpful, especially if you're tracking the meeting, is to say things that advance the meeting's hygiene. For example, let's say the conversation gets off track or we're running out of time. You can say, hey, everyone, I think we have 10 minutes left. Let me summarize what I think we've heard and where we need to go next. That's super helpful. And it's a way to add your voice in an influential way.
Awesome. Great. So we started to move towards the question of feedback and how to give constructive feedback, how to receive it. It's if you're a leader, that's going to be part of your role, being able to give constructive feedback and not damage relationships in the course of doing it. As coaches, that must be something you're doing all the time, having to give constructive feedback. So help us, give us your wisdom on how you go about it.
I give a lot of feedback workshops. And the thing that I always ask everybody at the beginning is, can you think of a time, like the best piece of feedback you've ever gotten? Maybe it's something that changed your life. And I certainly have that. A mentor once told me, you're way too creative to be in payments. I was like, oh, you know what? I am. Maybe I should go do something else. But when we think about it that way, we can start to understand feedback, even constructive feedback, as, the cliche, a gift. But it's when it's given from a place of compassion and caring. Like if you look at the person that you're giving this feedback to, maybe they don't know this thing that they're doing. And if they knew, if they could do something about it, it could change their life. It's coming from that place that we can say pretty direct, clear, and maybe difficult things. Netflix actually has a framework for this. It's their 4 A's feedback framework. And one of the A's is the feedback aims to assist. It aims to assist the person that's giving it. And if you come from there, you slow down, you take some care, maybe ask for some consent. Hey, I have something I want to share with you that only a true friend would. Then you can say pretty difficult things.
Does that change if you're the manager? I mean, if you're in the position of giving a performance review and actually it's about, what your comp will be and what your promotions will look like, and just how does that dynamic change?
I think it's even more pronounced because as a manager, you have such a high ability to help this person grow. And how many of us have had a manager, and you can feel it when they truly care about you and they're willing to tell you what you need to do, as opposed to, oh, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings, right? Kim Scott, amazing Xoogler, right, has a model for this in her radical candor framework for feedback. And it's called, when you don't say the thing, it's called ruinous empathy, which can lead to actually more difficulty for that person you're managing if they don't know, and if they're not giving a chance to fix it.
Yeah, I think these are such important points. And, I'm thinking about, doesn't have to be big, right? It could be even a small thing. And I think if as leaders and coaches, we can catch something early on, if you see it being repetitive. And I use the example of, and I've had this happen, we probably all have, where you're either cut off in meetings or talked over, or you're noticing that someone else is doing that a lot. And I've had that on teams, and even with managers, and have given feedback of, you're actually cutting that person off, and it's really better to allow people to complete their thoughts, because then people don't feel heard. But so you say it in a kind way, because we're human. We don't want to feel like we're hurting somebody else, and we might. And I think Catherine and Amy said it, like, we don't always know. But even little pieces of feedback in the moment, I think that's really important, but not in front of other people, of course. But just to give people a tip, like, hey, we'll wait till someone finishes their thought, because I really want to hear from you too. And then it makes for a better discussion if we're all being heard.
Awesome. One piece of coaching, and this goes back to if the place that the feedback is coming from. Sometimes I've felt that if I don't give one person feedback, I'm letting others down. That, in other words, if there's one person that's failing a group, you sort of let down the rest of the group by not sharing that feedback. And so sometimes it often you sort of distance it of I may be sort of impacting this one person, but I'm impacting everyone else by not doing it. And so you can't win, right? But you also can't lose. You have to try to improve things for everyone. The flip side of that is receiving constructive feedback. We've all had some. Sometimes it feels like not such a gift. But so can you coach yourself, and how do you apply your principles to yourself on the things that you can control, understanding that we shouldn't be, taking every, misstep or mishap or misstructured meeting as our own fault, but for the things that you can control and improve, how do you coach yourself?
Yeah, Amy, do you want me to? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I thought about this, and I think we can coach ourselves, but I always feel like we can get to the next place that we want to go. It's more fun, and it's more effective to do it with someone else or in a group. But for me, in my own kind of self-coaching, when I do that, is one of the things I do is at the end of the day, and this you've probably heard of, and it's been written, where you kind of evaluate your day, but it only takes 10 minutes. What didn't go well, and then why. And I find that helps ground me and kind of keeps me focused on, where I want to go. But at the same time, for me, I've always had a coach in some way over the years along the way. I mean, whether it be a business coach, I've even had, coaches for different things that I wanted to do. And I always found that with a coach, the goals or the objectives accelerated, because I could only get so far on my own. And I think that's just the power of human connection, and then people having expertise in an area. So the answer is yes, and yes, and it helps to have someone help. You can get further together.
Terry, I love that. What didn't go well and why? I'm going to do that every day. What a profound impact that can make as a daily practice, right? Just imagining the week over week awareness that we might get. I think that is the gift of feedback. This is so pithy, but I'm going to say it. We have eyes that look this way. We don't have eyes that look back. We can't see ourselves well. The example here is, like, think about Serena Williams, right? Like, she can't see where she's holding the racket, but someone else can. And if they say, just, shift your angle 10 degrees and the ball goes in, that's what we want, right? But yeah, to your question, Catherine, I think we absolutely can coach ourselves. Terry, journaling, I think I totally agree with you. That's a number one thing, because that's how we can be in conversation with ourselves. And in fact, journaling is where reflection happens, and reflection is where learning happens. So that's where a lot of growth is. And then yes, I've gotten some tough feedback in my days. I get it all the time from my husband. It's not fun to hear. You're like, that's not true. Well, but this, and you find yourself getting defensive. Well, but this time you did, and actually when I slow down and I can, have a laugh, comical, right? Be comical about it. I recognize, oh, the stronger my reaction was about that, the more there is something actually real here for me. And I absolutely do take feedback like a strainer, not a sponge, right? Because feedback oftentimes says more about the person giving it than the person receiving it. So think about that for feedback you've had in your career as well. I think I like thinking about that. But anyway, if there is something really here for me, what I try to ask myself is, okay, you know what? Forget it. Let's say I did it in the way that they're suggesting. Am I so tied to the way that I did it that I wouldn't try this new thing? Like, what if I did do it that way? What might happen? And I just try to get curious and then run an experiment. And if it's a better result, then hey, I'm all for it. So I try to I guess take my ego, I guess, a little as much as I can, honor the ego and then kind of see if I can take it out of it.
Awesome. That's awesome. Have you ever confronted conflicting feedback? Like you have one group of people that loves that you're so direct and decisive. Yeah, this is just a hypothetical example here. And another group of people that thinks you move too quickly and don't take input from stakeholders. And so that's just an example. But, how do you, I would say, adapt to conflicting feedback?
Wow, what a great question.
Yeah.
One. I have clients that get conflicting feedback. And there have been situations where it's the environment and there's a gendered norm of leadership for women, right? We're expected to be warm and all these things. And when we're not, people get upset or I'm simplifying things, right? I think my biggest insight about this is actually I took the Stanford Business School Interpersonal Dynamics course, otherwise known as touchy-feely, where you just sit in a room on a hot entire weekend and give each other feedback. It's intense, but so but a metaphor that they gave us there was funhouse mirrors. So in some mirrors you look long and lanky, in other mirrors you look wide and round, in other mirrors your head is twice the size of your body. And that gave me the insight that that's happening all the time in the world. We just don't hear it. We just don't hear it. And what it told me was that at the end of the day, we are responsible for, or we get to choose how we show up and what we say. And what being human is that messy middle of how you see me through your lens and how I'm trying to show up and how we can actually get on the same page about that without necessarily me needing to change to meet what you need. And maybe I want to do that. Maybe it'll help me in the situation. Maybe I can choose that. Maybe it is authentic to my values and it helps me grow, but maybe not. And maybe there's something here for us to both learn from one another. And it's in that messy middle that I think, that's where diversity is too, right? That's the power of having diverse teams. It's not making everybody the same.
I love that, acknowledging that, you don't have to accept all the feedback, right? You take it and you make use of it and you choose what suits your value system. I love it.
Yeah. I would add, and this is going way back when I was first interviewing, and this whole idea of not accepting all the feedback. This was interview feedback. This is meant to be a little funny, and this is something I couldn't change. And this was in the finance industry. It was very male dominated, but I'm like, I want to just go and, be on Wall Street and be in investments. And so I started interviewing. My first professional interview, the feedback was, you're short, you're female, and you don't have any experience. And I think sometimes when I would get feedback, that kind of was my framework for receiving feedback over the years. It's like, okay, how much of this is true? What can I really change? And where's the strainer, to Amy's, kind of where's the strainer? Because sometimes when people give feedback, they're only looking at very shallow things. And then, or there are things that you actually really can't change and don't matter. But I just thought that I think about that feedback sometimes, because I realize that that's what helped me get through people giving feedback that really doesn't make any sense and not accepting it, So.
Yeah, awesome. So listen, many folks on the call and many of our Xoogler women are going through career transitions, changes, looking at new opportunities. You both have made significant transitions in your careers. Can you talk to us a little bit? I mean, this isn't coaching and leadership. This is, how do you evaluate that yourself? How do you coach and lead yourself through those transitions? Maybe just pick one and tell us how you made your choices.
Mary, I'm so excited to hear yours, because you've made some incredible changes and shifts, and you had so many different industries.
Well, and likewise, Amy, do you want me to go? I'm happy to.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but
yeah, sure. Yeah, true. I had industry changes and role changes, but I think one thing about that I reflect on with career transitions is, I may have just done it unconsciously. I always thought about, well, what are the skills that I have, or what are the skills that I want to develop, and what's that next thing I want to do and why? And really, and I was talking about this with someone a couple days ago, where I have found that some of the things I really liked to do when I was younger have followed me along the way, and even decades later, I'm actually doing those things. And what I mean by starting a business, like when I was a kid, I had Terry's dog walking service. I wanted to have my own business, but along the professional journey of working in big companies and working at a startup, I always had in the back of my mind wanting to do something like have a company, and wasn't sure what it was going to be. So some of the times I transitioned, I was always kind of looking at going back in time and saying, are those things still true? Do I still want that, and why? And so that was, kind of just talking about themes that have followed me and why I made even the transition up till now of having my own business. Got a little fly there, but I think, and I'll talk, because I think it's helpful for everyone. So we're Xooglers, is why did I move from Google to, just not, it was a role change. And, I think I was just feeling like I wasn't growing, but I also knew I needed to take the leadership role in my own growth. And we kind of learned that at Google. Like, if you want to progress in your career, you've got to be the person that's managing that. And I wasn't growing the way I wanted to, but I always had in the back of my mind, I wanted to have my own company, but I wanted to build something. Amy, you talked about it earlier, like you like to work with people that build. I think that that's awesome. And, wanting to build a big company isn't necessarily going to fulfill that. But I went to another big company because I was recruited to build, a function. So that really motivated me and made me excited about wanting to do the next thing. And then that role didn't end up, it wasn't kind of the attributes of the role weren't really what they were trying to do. So I moved on, but I always wanted to work for a startup, and then going to Databricks. So I always had these things that, I always wanted to do that. And then I would somehow do it, but figure out what skills do I have that I can insert into those organizations where I'm going to help the business move forward. But it was, I spent a lot of time reflecting, meditate, writing. I do a lot of sports to keep my mental well-being, because in any transition, I think, even if it's your choice or my choice, there's an emotional piece that is, in this really big piece of self-care that we really need to take care of, because it's not that easy. There are the challenges and the no's that happen, and you have to overcome those. And so I think self-care really helps. But I'll stop there. I kind of jumped around a little bit. But I think the main thing is, I'm realizing now a lot of the themes that I thought about and cared about when I was younger, I'm actually doing those things now, which I find interesting.
That's been so true for me too, Terry. I think it's the way we're schooled But we were schooled, we have to take subjects we're not good at, and then we spend a lot of time focusing on the subjects and getting better at the things we're not good at. But in fact, I think what I want to build my life around, where I'm moving towards, whether that means a career change or not, but the one North Star for me has been my strengths. What do I love doing? What makes my heart sing? What am I better at than, somebody else, right? The most people, what comes naturally to me. And when I do that, right, first of all, there's so much more joy in my life. And I tell my startup founders this all the time, that is the basis of your unique differentiator and your value proposition as a company and as a human. Do more of what you're good at, right? So that's what I've been following quite a bit. And also to share I love frameworks. So also to share a framework, it's from the Japanese, it's called Ikigai. Probably many of you have heard about it, but it's 4 concentric circles. I'm going to put a link here in the chat. I just found this on Google, but what you want, scroll down, look at the image. But what you're trying to figure out is, all right, what do I love to do? What am I good at? Then what the world needs, right? That's important. And then what can I be paid for? Because we do want to be paid for what we do. And for me, first of all of that can change, but certainly what the world needs and what we can be paid for changes a lot. When you think about our lifetimes in the age of tech and innovation, right? So in the next 10 years, that may be different, but what I love and what I'm good at, probably more consistent. What I'm good at, I may take that, MBA course or whatever, go back to school, right? But that's kind of how I see the 4 mixing together.
Great.
Yeah, I love that framework, Amy. That's a great framework. You know about that one? What I love is, can you make a living with it, right? Like you see a lot of frameworks that are about purpose, and I think those are super important. That was one that I really loved for a lot of reasons, but it included, can I make a living at it? And I think sometimes that's missing in some of the, frameworks, but yeah.
Well, since you both are living the dream, and we could all use, I think, some inspiration, tell us about the thing you're proudest of in your careers.
That's a good question.
Yeah, there was a moment last year. So my own pocket of the earth is that, like the one thing that I really take from Google, a lot of values, but one thing is, hey, these 2 guys dropped it's from Stanford, whatever, right? They made this little company in their garage, and then it ended up culturally influencing the world. We all think differently because of Google. It's not just because we're Xooglers, but average people do, right? Think about the values like, launch and iterate, right? Focus on the user, things like that. And I thought that was so profound. And so I work specifically with female founders and people with marginalized identities because I think that their cultural norms, there is going to be another Google one day, and it's right now sitting in someone's garage. Mm-hmm. And those are the people I want to back, right? That's where I want to put my steam. So the thing I feel most proud of is last year I launched a scholarship in my coaching practice, because it's not always possible for women and people with marginalized identities who haven't had the privilege to pay for coaching. And it was sponsored by one of my clients. And then later on, it was sponsored by one of my mentors. And this guy is, he used to coach the original Apple team. He's an amazing Silicon Valley coach. And I ended up being able to work with 2 founders that are exceptional, but, affording coaching was just not in the cards. And I felt so, so proud of that. They're incredible people. They're building incredible things. One of them her name is Chris Wong, and she's building a ADHD coaching platform. And she has ADHD, right? And the other one his name is Thomas Drew, and he's building a platform for, he's a Black man, a wellness platform built by a Black man for Black men, which I think is so needed because there's not a lot of diversity in wellness. So I feel so proud that I got to work with both of them.
Terrific.
That's great, Amy. That's super cool. Very cool things to be proud of. I don't have, I'm just starting out as an entrepreneur, and shouldn't say just, by the way. But I think for me, what I'm most proud of, and of course, what I can share with others is just being able to be true to yourself and be true to myself and say, this is what I really want to do. And this is what I value in myself that I can actually share with other people. And really kind of deciding, just going for it and setting up a company really that is mission-based, that I think it's not the only thing that solves it. There's a lot of people having this conversation about ageism, but being someone that really wants to help other people and in late to stage career to keep going and thriving and just helping to solve that problem. So I'm just happy that, I've made the decision. I guess that's just being proud to make a decision to do something that I've always wanted to do, but then figuring out what the product is or what the offering is. And, really kind of excited to see where it's going to go.
I mean, definitely not say just. You're founding a company. That is a really big decision, and it's whenever we've heard from founders, it's a hard and lonely journey and a super brave one. So,
but the one thing I'll add, and Catherine and Amy, you probably found this in everyone here, is something that I've actually learned that I didn't know I wasn't doing early on, and I didn't always ask for help. And I think that goes back to, Amy, what we talk about as women. There's things that are kind of in our DNA that we don't necessarily do. And we try to get things done and do things on our own. And I think the difference, and it is something I'm proud of, is really learning how to ask for help, how to ask for the right help, and to help me grow, but then of course it helps other people grow as well. So that's something, I think it's really good to keep in mind. Like, asking for help is so valuable, and kind of, again, putting egos aside. And I think for me, I didn't ask for help because I didn't always think about it. It wasn't even because I didn't want help. So that's a kind of a learning that I'm proud over the years that I've finally learned, because I need it because when you're starting something new. And that's why the Xoogler community is so awesome. I mean,
that's the whole reason we're here, right?
Yeah.
The Xooglers is just this amazing resource. So do tap into it and do use it. Okay, last chance, folks. I'm going to open it up to questions if anyone has anyone. Here's Lucy. I'll read out the question. Curious about your thoughts on the decision to return to the office and consolidation within tech to a few hubs as it pertains to DEI within tech. Yeah, back to the office could be a whole other topic, but
I think I'm really particularly interested in just like musings about like, how are those decisions being made, and is there an awareness and a discussion of like the upper echelons of leadership in these spaces about the implications that has for trying to be more diverse, and just some of the challenges that are likely to be for those groups.
I mean, what I've noticed is, and this is sort of in the early days of return to office, and I was at a company, people tended to follow, company leaders tended to follow like the larger companies as to what they were doing. But I also, and I think we all have done a lot of reading on, it's kind of a gray area. I mean, there's CEOs in different size companies that are coming out and saying, hey, yes, we want people back in the office. Some people are in the middle. I don't think it's clear, and there's any one stance on it, whether yes, we should all be in the office or not. But I mean, my personal opinion on it is, probably like a lot of us, is the pandemic changed a lot of things, and people did do a lot of self-reflection, and people were very productive during COVID at home. And I think it's very hard to go back to everyone being in the office, though there are some good things that happen in the office as well. Just a comment I'm making on it. I just don't know where we'll eventually land, but somehow it seems like we're trending towards in the office. I don't know what anybody else feels.
well, I hope that's not true.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I honestly, like, I mean, I find a 1,000 very concrete reasons why working from home is better for family life, for the environment, for just like mental health, for like lots of, I mean, not that the office doesn't have a place in that somewhere, but exclusively in the office. You know, I have a 4-year-old. I can't even fathom. I don't know how parents before did it. I bow down to them in amazement, but it's just, so I for one, I'm in the flexible camp.
I think my ulterior motive is just recognizing how much of a sort of DEI issue this could be, and seeing a potential opportunity for there to be voices and people coming together to sort of point out. There's a lot of talk about how much we want to improve diversity within tech, whether it's women or other groups. And I don't see a lot of action about actually creating the kinds of structures that make it possible to split kids with other things. And I don't know, it's been weighing on me a lot recently. Thank you for sharing.
This might be a great topic for a future career series. I'm certainly no expert on this, Lucy. I feel like I'm just in your camp. I'm like, what the heck is going on, people? How are these decisions being made? Or is anyone in there? So I would love to join that one.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's on the list. So thank you for the great ideas for the next topic. And thank you everyone for joining us and making this such a great discussion. Terry, Amy, you guys are amazing. Thanks for the insights. Thanks for lending us your time. And appreciate everyone for joining.
Thank you for hosting us, Catherine.
Yeah.
Every week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Cheers.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Have a great afternoon. Bye.